Testing 1, 2, testing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Hemp podcast, I should say. Only on hemp.com with your host, Josh Davis. This is the first of hopefully a series of podcasts that I'll be doing with different business leaders whose companies or products are made with hemp or use hemp in some way, some part of the plant. What does that mean? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. Today we're going to be talking to a gentleman who specializes in construction using hemp and concrete. Other podcasts will include the growing of hemp, industrial hemp, the legality of hemp, the politics of hemp. We'll also be talking to people about textiles, about food, about biofuel, about plastics, everything that you can make out of hemp. We're going to have a podcast. So once again, if you know someone who uses hemp in their product, if you know someone who has a company specializing in hemp product, let me know. You can contact me at josh@hemp.com. And as always, if you'd like to advertise with hemp.com, give me a shout out at josh@hemp.com. So without further ado, let's start the first interview. Born in 1959 in New Zealand, Greg Flavall graduated high school in Vancouver, Canada. He pursued a career in building. He learned all facets of construction, then later moved to California. He partnered with a friend to start a general contracting company, but in 2006, he saw a change of direction when he learned about the many benefits of industrial hemp and its applications, particularly in regard to construction, to the reduction of CO2 emitted from mineral-based building products, and to increase in indoor air quality. In 2008, Greg co-founded Hemp Technologies, which is out of Asheville, North Carolina, and they build homes, commercial buildings, utilizing different products made with hemp. Greg's also a minister in the Universal Life Church, and he plays bagpipes at funerals and weddings. Greg, thanks for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Josh.
Hey, so bagpipes, huh?
Well, I suffered from bronchitis as a child, and the doctor, when I was 10, told my mother that if I took up a wind instrument, that it would strengthen my lungs, and sure enough, it has. Never had a problem since.
And this is when you were living in New Zealand?
In New Zealand,
Okay, and how'd you find your way over to North Carolina?
Well, my mother was transferred. She's an accountant. She was transferred with a New Zealand-based carpet company to Vancouver as the financial controller, and obviously she dragged me along.
Gotcha. And at what point did you start to get involved in the construction industry?
Well, I started building furniture at school.
Okay.
One thing leads to another.
In shop class.
Shop class, that's it.
Excellent. And so you came over to the United States. You started to work in construction. And I'm assuming you were, working all different facets of it, but then you sort of had this change of direction in 2006. Can you explain to me what that was all about?
Well, I was busy building custom homes in Los Angeles, in West LA more specifically, and, it came to me that we were wasting a lot of materials. And, for example, in Santa Monica, there's an ordinance to sweep all the rainwater that comes out to the street. And that's, an average roof, that's about 30 to 40,000 gallons of free water that could be used, for gardening or whatever. And, when we demolish a house, we take down all the old walls and throw everything in the dumpster on the street. And then I'd see some Hispanic people coming along with their trucks, going in there, denailing all the wood, stacking it nice and neatly on their truck and taking it away and recycling it. And those various, aspects of building became more prevalent as costs for building went up. Mm-hmm. We're wasting, on a job site, we're wasting about 19 to 20% of our materials that are going into the dumpster and being taken away. There's no reason why we can't be recycling our materials. That in itself would help reduce greenhouse gases. That in itself would help reduce the building costs, which back then were about $200 a square foot. In this economy, building costs have come down substantially to around $125 to $145 a square foot. And, it does cost more to build green. However, recent statistics have shown that building green actually saves money, not only in the building stage, but also in the life cycle stage of the building.
What is
So
the, oh, sorry to interrupt. What is the, when people say I'm building green, what is that? Is there a serious definition for what building green means, or is it just a
well,
obscure idea?
there are various levels of building green, and it depends on how much you want to spend to go green in terms of, for example, living roofs or solar panels or geothermal. There are lots of different aspects or lots of different levels which concur with expense at that point to make your house as self-sufficient or as energy efficient as possible. In Germany, to give you an example, the Passive House Institute will become, or the Passive House regulations will become standard building code in 2012 in Germany. That means that every new house has to be built to be 90% more energy efficient than what is currently being built.
90%.
And those are the 90%.
Wow.
That's huge. The reason they're doing that in Europe is because the cost of energy is increasing exponentially.
Right.
The same thing will happen eventually here. Our coal-fired power stations are expensive and inefficient, and the cost of energy keeps increasing. It behooves us to look at alternative ways of building and to not be so reliant on petrochemical products,
Mm-hmm.
and to reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost. Those are the four main ingredients, I believe, in building green.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost.
Yes.
So how does I'll ask, how does hemp fall into that, and what was your first experience with it? And I guess it's a three-parter. How does it fit into that? What was your experience? And then I guess what was your did you have any preconceived notions about the product?
Not really. I was originally back in Hollywood doing a remodel for some friends of mine on their kitchen, and Alex's wife was in her third year of law school writing a thesis on hemp, the miracle plant of the future. I said, "What? Hemp? What's that?" Next thing you know, I'm researching it and hopped a flight to London to meet the people that were actually pioneering and building for about 8-9 years in England with this material, and then finding out all about building with hemp. I thought, wow, this is terrific. It's carbohydrate-based material. It's renewable, sustainable. You can grow enough material on 2.5 to 3 acres to build the walls, the insulating walls of an average size home. This is great, and supposedly, cost effective. It does cost more because we've got to import this material into the United States because we can't grow it here yet, and I guess that's a question for the future, a future discussion. But they've been building with hemp in Europe for over 20 years now, and very, very successfully. The oldest known hemp building on the planet so far is over 300 years old in Japan.
And exactly what are you doing with the hemp?
We actually we're taking the cellulose core of the hemp plant, which is the plant without any fiber. The fiber has been stripped off that, and it's chopped up into small pieces, a bit like wood shiv, if you like. And we mix that with lime-based binder that then creates. Then we then form it around the steel or wood studs of the house, and we turn it into a monolithic, super energy efficient walling system.
And so why do you use lime as your base?
Well, because lime requires a lot less carbon dioxide to manufacture as opposed to cement. The difference between lime and concrete or cement is that cement draws water but will not breathe it out, whereas lime is self-breathing. It's always moving.
And when you mix the hemp with the actual lime, what's happening there? Is it coating it?
Well, essentially, yes. If you think about making concrete in a traditional sense and you put stones in the concrete, that's your aggregate that fills it out. In our case, we're putting hemp shiv or hurd into that mix with lime, and that becomes the aggregate and the filler. But more importantly, it is a cellulose material, and the DNA structure of hemp, unlike wood or kenaf or straw or linseed stalks or even corn stalks, is such that the air entration within that wall will continue to breathe. People ask, well, why can't you use other waste products that we have in the United States, like, for example, kenaf or flax or straw? And the answer is that under 5,000 times magnification, it's impossible to compare any other cellulose material with the benefits of the hemp shiv. It's the only plant out there. We can use other aggregates or other fillers, but we won't get the same insulation value, quite simply.
And when you talk about insulation value, what's actually happening, I guess for a layman? Like, I'm inside a house, it's made out of hemp. What am I going to experience?
Here's a layman's look at it. If we typically come home from work at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and in the heat of the summer, the 3 o'clock sun heat or the 3 o'clock heat is inside your house, and you've got to crank up the air conditioning to make it comfortable. Mm-hmm. The reverse is the same in the winter. Our walls maintain 15 to 16 degrees Celsius all the time. So they are, because of the density and the thermal mass of these walls, they are breathing in or absorbing the heat or the cold, and then releasing it back up as the temperature changes. It's called basically a steady state R value, instead of our traditional dry line construction walls where we've got 2x4s, we've got pink insulation or some cellulose fill insulation, and we've got drywall on one side and we've got stucco on the outside or some siding. Those are different materials reacting with each other in conjunction with horizontal and vertical cold joints, because that's not one solid infill. So that means that you've got a leaky home, but it's been, in the past 15 years, we've been building with Tyvek and other materials to basically turn it into an airtight structure. But that's not in keeping with healthy air conditions. People are getting sick. People are finding they can't live in their homes where they spend a lot of time because of the toxic outgassing of these different interacting materials.
So it actually cleans and filters the air.
It does clean and filter the air, and lime itself. And there's a page of, there's a lime life cycle page on our website that explains the whole cycle of lime. But lime requires carbon dioxide to actually carbonate. So it means that we've not only have we locked up about 20 tons of carbon in an average size home by encapsulating that hemp cellulose, those walls will require carbon dioxide for many, many, many years to basically turn into stone.
I heard something else that it actually helps with pest control because of the high acidity. Is that true as well?
Yes, it's basically a septic lime. So insects such as termites or rodents, ants, basically, if you think about these poor little creatures breathing lime into their nostrils, they don't like it.
So they stay far away.
They stay far away. We've successfully installed hemp and lime insulation as a dry cellulose blow-in into attics, for example, in Europe, and it gets rid of any rodents that are up there because they just can't stand the lime.
You're listening to the Hemp.com podcast with your host, Josh Davis. We'll be right back. Do you sell or manufacture a product that is made from hemp? Or do you have a product that would appeal to someone who uses hemp products? Then the opportunity is right to advertise with Hemp.com. Simply send us an email to advertise@hemp.com. We can create an ad that is right for you and put it right on our homepage. Or we can even mention you during the podcast. We offer a variety of options for whatever your needs, so reach a loyal niche market by sending us an email to advertise@hemp.com. to the interview with Greg Flavall. This is your host, Josh Davis. Today we're talking with Greg. So he is the owner and founder of Hemp Technologies. They are a construction company located in Asheville, North Carolina. They focus on using hemp and concrete, or hemp in concrete, I should say, to build houses and buildings. So Greg, we were talking about the energy efficiency of building with hemp, but what about if you have a house? What about resale value?
It's wonderful because, I've just done some statistics with a friend of mine recently, and it shows that over the last, 3 years, for example, during this economic downturn, that the resale value per square foot in this area is $175 a square foot. Mm-hmm. Over the same time for green, that is, if you've got a green certified house, over the same time period, a traditional constructed house has dropped in value by 13.9%. So you can see the swing away from traditional construction, which is shit construction anyway, to to green or certified green construction, where you've got an energy efficient home. And it all comes down to what's coming out of my back pocket every month. Not only how much does it cost me to build this house, which is, let's say it costs $150 to build a house down here, but the resale value is $175. You've made money by the time you walk in, but you're not going to lose money over the ensuing years by potentially dropping in value that property. Plus, you've got those energy cost savings every month. This house up on the mountain, the first house that we completed, mm-hmm. They're up at 3,500 feet elevation. The bank came back just upon the closing of the mortgage to refinance it. They came back at $180,000 more than what was initially estimated for this house. Wow! Based on using the hempcrete and some other renewable materials like pure panel, which we have also. The banks are into it. They're into going green. So there's a lot of reasons to actually focus on building green. There's 1% of this population is chemically sensitive. Whether that's in their heads or not doesn't matter. They're chemically sensitive. We had a woman whose house we're doing right now who carried one of our hempcrete blocks in her car for 5 months before she made a decision, because she wanted to make sure she wasn't allergic to anything in our material. Because she bought a condo, she couldn't live in it because of the toxins, the outgassing of these materials. Okay. So from a real estate perspective, I think it's something that's going to come to the forefront in the years to come.
That's going to be demanded almost.
Yeah, this house on the mountain they initially had it spec'd out for an 8-ton split system. They reduced it to 2-ton split system just for comfort more than anything at that altitude. And, in the heat of the summer, and you know how hot it gets down here in the summer with the humidity. Sure. The heat of the summer, their cooling bill for 3,600 square feet was $100.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, that kind of leads me into my a couple other questions. In terms of the actual product, does your company make it? Do you buy it from someone else? How does that all work?
Well, we import the hemp shiv from Europe. We have 3 or 4 different sources for the material. At this stage, it's more expensive to import it out of Canada, and they don't have as clean a product as we would like for our building. So we import it from Europe, across the Atlantic Ocean. We also import right now the lime binder from our partners in the UK and from France. We then take a regular mortar mixer, concrete mixer, and we mix the hemp with the binder and water on site, and then we pour it into, or place it in situ, it's called, inside these forms that we put around the frame at whatever thickness we want. We lightly tamp that material just to give it some stability, and then the next day we can take those forms off and we've got a wall standing.
So you don't have to really pack it down using any kind of machine. It's all hand done.
No, it's all done by hand. It is compared to other forms of construction a little bit labor intensive, but that doesn't matter. You've got a totally green, breathable wall system.
Okay. And so in terms of the other companies that are out there right now, is this booming? What's going on with the market? I saw on the website that you guys are working with uh, hemp tech, or what is it? The Mario's company out of Chicago.
Yeah, American
American
Lime
Lime Tech.
Technology. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do they do the same thing
American
you
Lime.
do? Are you partners? Do you work together? How does this all work?
No, we are essentially distributors for their product, um, but they don't build anything. They're not builders.
Okay.
They're importers, and they have the distribution of the Tradical Hempcrete name brand material for North America. So I'm a builder. My partner's a builder. We want to buy the product. We buy it from them at wholesale.
Okay. Now, is this something that you're going to be able to buy in the future? I go to Home Depot. I want to, put an addition on my house. I go and buy a bunch of
I
hempcrete.
doubt it. I doubt it. I mean, we could sell it through Home Depot or Lowe's or any of those other large chains, but essentially, no, I don't believe so. We initially thought, well, okay, here's some material. We're builders. Let's sell the material. But the only way to get it out there is to actually build stuff with it.
Mm-hmm.
We did the same thing in Canada recently, or this year. We went to Manitoba province and did a presentation to the University of Manitoba. And we said to them, look, you've got 10,000 acres of hemp you've grown up here, this last year. What have you done with it? You're not building anything with it. You've got all the shiv laying around. You're not building with it. You should be building with it. So now we're contracted with the provincial government of Manitoba, Ministry of Housing,
Mm-hmm.
to advise on building uses for hemp. And under their project Hemp for Houses, we actually are designing, and there's a page on our website with the design of that first house. We'll be starting in the spring to build the first hemp house in Winnipeg for the government.
Yeah, I was looking at some statistics out of the number of hectares that were being utilized for growing hemp, and it was really high a couple of years ago, and then it started to decrease. And I was reading a blog, I forget which one it was, and someone was saying, see, everyone was pushing for hemp, and now it's not being used for anything, and it was a bad idea. And I
don't concur with that. The acreage is actually increasing. This year in Canada, they've grown more hectares than last year. But bearing in mind that they grow predominantly for seed up there, because the United States is importing so much food, hemp food that is, from Canada, that they are growing more acreage to keep up with that. They're not concentrating on the fiber or the cellulose. So the seed plant actually is a little shorter than the actual industrial hemp plant that would be used for fiber growth, for example.
Is it a different plant, or are you using the different the female versus the male?
It's simply a different variety. There are 24, 25 different varieties of hemp seed that have been developed in Canada for growing and for acreage and for yields.
Okay.
And that's ever changing, ever improving, ever evolving, I should say. But the primary focus in Canada is to grow seed for food and for fuel, eventually for fuel.
Okay.
Hemp seed oil has a refrigerated shelf life of about 12 months, after which it will turn rancid. If you then refilter that oil and take the fats and the solids out of that, you've now got a material that you can use for biofuel.
Huh.
So there's not any aspect of this plant that will be wasted.
So if I'm a farmer, do I need to decide if I want to plant industrial hemp for construction purposes or food hemp? Is that
I would,
need to decide?
if I was a farmer, I would be looking for food, because food will give me the biggest yield, the biggest return on my dollars invested.
Okay.
In Germany, however, they have developed a way to dual crop the hemp. So they take off the seeds for the food and fuel, and then they go back through and they combine harvest for the fiber and for the cellulose. That fiber is then being turned into door panels for Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi, and the cellulose is being used for paper, it's being used for building, and it's being used, get this, for animal bedding.
In terms of the fiber, and just the amount of yield, you mentioned earlier a comparison about, you can use, I think you said 2 acres or so could build a single family home. When we talk about trees, and the amount, for fiber, the amount of fiber we get from a tree versus the amount of fiber we get from hemp. What is the comparison there?
Well, if you look at one of the pages on our website, in the iHemp Facts page, I think I state right there that hemp will, 1 acre of hemp is equivalent to 4 acres of trees in terms of pulp, fiber pulp, cellulose. Not only is 1 acre of hemp, breathing in or taking in a lot more carbon dioxide than the same acre of trees, it's doing that in 12 to 14 weeks. So, Josh, there's a huge difference between growing hemp and growing trees. And look at the rate we're felling trees on the earth.
Of course.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I would like to mention here, Josh, in terms of building, is that we've actually, with using our hempcrete building materials for walling, we've actually been able to reduce the amount of lumber in that wall, in that structural component, by 30 to 40%. So we're actually helping the trees as well.
Wow. So you're using the actual fiber for the wall, for the structural part of the wall?
No. I'm talking about using timber or lumber. We take a tree and we cut it into 2x4s and 2x6s.
Okay.
And we use that to frame our structure.
Right.
But because we're going to encapsulate that structure with hempcrete, we can actually use 30 to 40% less of that lumber.
I see. So what's happening globally right now? We're in the United States, where it is illegal for farmers to grow industrial hemp. But it seems like you look all over the world and everyone else is sort of doing it and creating an industry.
Well, what's going on is big business. That's essentially why it was turned into a prohibitive material back in the late 30s. And then if you go back through the history books, Josh, you'll see that in 1942 it became patriotic to grow hemp for the war effort.
Right. They did everyone put out the video Hemp for Victory.
Yeah, hemp for victory, exactly. And then in 1945 they said, we don't need that hemp anymore. The taxes were imposed once again, and the last known hemp production or hemp growth that I know of was in Kentucky back in 1954. After which it just died off completely. But we're in a different age now. We don't need the hemp for sails or for as much rigging as we used to use on the old sailing ships and in the Navy. But we've found other ways to use this beautiful, miraculous plant. This is the only plant that I know of in all my research that you can house yourself, you can feed yourself, and you can clothe yourself.
I always looked at it as energy, food, and shelter. Those are like the three things that humankind needs to survive at a basic level.
Correct. Not only that, when we decorticate the hemp plant, which is to say we are separating the fiber from the shiv, there is a dust that's collected during that separation process, and that dust we can actually compress into a high calorific biomass heating log that we then sell to the local coal company to implement their coal use.
Wow.
So we're not wasting any part of the plant. Not one.
That's amazing. You can't really say that about a lot of other things like that.
No, not
some
at
sort
all.
of waste that goes into creating, the product.
Now, it's interesting that, can I just add something here,
please.
Josh?
Absolutely.
The same hemp shiv that we're using for building as it's coming out of the processing facility is exactly the same hemp shiv that's used for animal bedding. There have been studies done in Canada and in England and in France that using hemp shiv for bedding for chickens, as an example, has reduced the mortality rate of the broiler, these broiler hens that we put on our dinner table. And it's reduced the incidence of dermatitis because it's so absorbent and keeps the chicken so dry. In the last 6 months, our partners have increased from 400 chickens to 600,000 chickens sleeping on hemp bedding because it's so much better. The other well-known use for it is horse bedding. Many high-end horses in Europe are using hemp for their bedding, because it's cleaner. It's much better for the horses, for their respiratory systems, and it doesn't clog in their hoofs as opposed to any other type of wood product.
Interesting. So there's all different facets for this, all different avenues.
And it's exactly the same cellulose, Josh, that we're using in our hempcrete.
And have you come into a point where you're having trouble getting the product, or are farmers willing to grow this?
We have an increasing number of farmers in America who have contacted us and who are anticipating and are willing to grow hemp once again. They can remember when their grandfathers were growing hemp, or their fathers had some hemp on the farm. Right. So, I mean, it's called ditchweed. But until that day comes, they just stand in abeyance. But in terms of the increasing demand for building, we have no problems with supply from anywhere, because, we're growing hemp in New Zealand, where I'm originally from. We're growing hemp in Australia. We're growing hemp in Romania. We're growing hemp in Germany, in France, in Canada, our neighbors. If I can just get past this NAFTA agreement and get the pricing down for shipping, we'll have a cheaper product into the US.
And is the hemp different in different countries, or can you grow the same? Are you getting the same product from the different countries?
It's essentially the same. It's essentially the same plant. It might just have a slight variation to the seed quality that's coming out of it. We did a trialing. One of our partners did a test growing of a few hundred hectares in Romania last year, comparing the Canadian hemp seed to the Romanian hemp seed, for example. And they had a really wet season come in, a lot of rain, and the Romanian hemp seed, didn't make it, but the Canadian hemp seed came up, flourished. So there are different, Hungary grows hemp. It has a different kind of hemp, but the fiber is essentially the same.
Okay.
The cellulose is essentially the same. It's just dependent on the climate as to what variety of hemp would be grown there.
I see. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Greg Flavall. He is the Flavall, I should say. He's the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Hemp Technologies USA out of Asheville, North Carolina. They focus on using hemp products to build housing. But you can also, it's not just houses, right? You can build commercial types of places as well.
Commercial and industrial. The first commercial structure was built 3.5 years ago, 3 hours northeast of London, and it was Adnams Brewery. It's a 50,000 square foot warehousing facility for freshly brewed beer. They saved $800,000 on not having to put any mechanical heating and cooling equipment onto that building.
Wow.
That translates to £1,000 per week in energy costs.
So if you build a building, does that mean you don't have a heating and cooling system? Or you do have one, but you just don't run it?
You won't run it as much. You won't put as much burden on it to run it. It depends on where you are as to what sort of requirement you would have for, just to make sure you've got that comfort level. But, at 3,500 feet elevation, the former mayor of Asheville that we built his hemp house for, he reduced that system from 8-ton split system down to a 2-ton split system for a 3,600 square feet house. In the heat of the summer, he paid $100 a month for his air conditioning.
Wow. So let's talk about just the future and what's going on. What's going to be the next step? I mean, obviously, the U.S. is way behind on this in terms of being a player in this field. What's going to happen next? And I'm not even it's from a business standpoint.
Josh, that's a good question. We started this business, my partner and I, David, 2 years ago in Asheville, North Carolina. We decided it was one of the greenest areas in the country to start this off. We went around with samples that we made for the first year, giving seminars and workshops and so forth. But once we'd gone vertical, and we've got now 3 houses vertical, and we're getting the press and the publicity from it, now we're working on something in the order of 40 projects around the United States that will or will not come to pass. Who knows? Some of them are just talk, but for the most part, I think people are pretty keen on this innovative material and the fact that they're concerned with increasing energy costs.
Mm-hmm. But in order for it, would it help you if it became legal in the United States? How would that change your business practice?
It would help us if it became legal to grow in the United States, because not only do we have the expertise in processing, we could set that infrastructure up fairly quickly, but the cost of product would drop in half, because right now it costs us double because we've got to import it from Europe. Or we've got to import it from Canada. The same thing. It's costing us double because we can't manufacture it here.
Right.
I looked into bringing raw bales of hemp out of Canada into the U.S. if we set up a processing facility to process it here. Do you know the DEA would not let us bring a bale of hemp across the border because there might be one live seed stuck in that plant, in that bale? Give me a break. We've got less than 0.03% THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol in the industrial hemp plant. And out in California, they're growing medical marijuana with 30% THC.
Sure.
I mean, the DEA are paranoid.
They're paranoid, but they also are ignorant because they don't understand. One of the biggest contentions of the DEA is that if you have a hemp field, you can hide your marijuana in it. But by its nature, you don't want to fertilize marijuana because you get a higher yield as soon as you fertilize it. The THC drops, which is exactly
Josh,
what hemp is.
You're right on the button when you say that about what they believe and the ignorance and the misinformation and the disinformation that people have been fed over the years. Because when you go to Europe, and we've got partners in Holland, for example, they grew 2,500 acres of hemp this last year, and I was over there earlier this year to help and participate in the harvesting of that crop. And you're driving along, roads between fields of hemp blowing in the wind, no electric fences, no marijuana plants growing in there. Because if somebody wanted to grow a marijuana plant in an industrial hemp field, the industrial hemp, which is its cousin, would kill it, as it kills all other weeds in the field. Now we had an interesting experience up in Canada recently. One of our partners wanted to grow 3 acres of hemp as a test study for building her house. There was a marijuana grower 1.5 miles away who came down and specifically asked her if she wouldn't mind not growing her industrial hemp crop this year because it would interrupt or infect her marijuana 1.5 miles away.
He was downhill, downwind.
I guess downwind. That's right. They don't want it. They can't use it.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's just, it is really just about misinformation. And we've been given this misinformation for years and years and years. But now people are slowly coming out of the woodwork and slowly, taking the blinders off and smelling the coffee, smelling the roses and saying, here's a plant that would not only help our economic downturn, we would be putting people to work in these green-collar jobs again. But now, last year, for example, we imported, or the American public imported $350 million worth of hemp products, industrial hemp products from other countries. That's $350 million that would have stayed inside our borders.
Sure. It's kind of maddening.
It is.
You're listening to the Hemp Podcast with your host, Josh Davis, on hemp.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Josh Davis, on hemp.com. Music you just heard was a little Julian Villard. I have to give a shout out to him because he let us use it for free. Thank you. That's Julian Villard. He's a great guy. So we're talking with Greg Flavall. Greg is the co-founder of Hemp Technologies, a construction company located in Asheville, North Carolina, specializing in hemp technologies, hence the name, Hemp Technologies. Greg, before we left for the break, we were talking about the legality issue of hemp in the United States and where we stand. So we know that it's illegal. We know that in order to get any kind of products, we have to import them into the United States, which makes things a little bit more expensive. The question is, what can we do about it?
Well, I think if anybody's listening that is interested in getting involved in helping to make industrial hemp legal in this country, the two best websites are votehemp.com, which is the non-profit sister entity to Hemp Industries Association, and they are wholly concerned with raising money to lobby against the government on behalf of farmers and legislative bodies to bring in industrial hemp growing back into America. Hemp Industries Association is also a funded body that we're involved with, and they are helping to increase awareness around the country of industrial hemp and the many products that can be produced from this beautiful plant. Currently, there are, and if I can touch Josh on the legislative side of things, there are currently 16 states in the U.S. where it has been passed that it is legal to grow industrial hemp. Two of those states, being Maine and Oregon, have different legislation where the governor has signed into law that you do not need a federal permit to grow industrial hemp. However, when those farmers try to bring in the hemp seeds to grow, they can't get it. They can't get them through the border. And consequently, if they were able to smuggle the seeds in, they would be basically that would be considered civil disobedience, and they'd lose their farms.
Sure. So
while it's legal in 16 states and growing, it's not legal because of the DEA and federal restrictions to import the seeds.
Yeah, I was actually down there. It was in 2009 when everybody, those guys, I think there were 6 of them, went down to the DEA and they planted the hemp on the lawn.
Oh, were you there? Cool.
Yeah, it was great. Cool. I mean, it was, they got arrested, of course, because hemp is illegal. But that was the intention. They just planted this seed down there.
Yes.
Good times. Okay. Anyway, Greg, I think we covered a lot of information today. Is there anything else that we want to discuss?
Josh, I think you've pretty much covered the gamut of it in a broad sense. There's a lot more that people can learn about industrial hemp as opposed to medical marijuana or marijuana in general. And we have a lot of information on our website at www.hemp-technologies.com. We've got hemp facts, we've got lime facts, we've got building project descriptions and where we're actually building. I mean, we're following the money at this point to build wherever people are interested in building, holistically. And we're in different countries with different partners building different projects using Hempcrete. That will only continue. And my partner and I are hemp advocates. We are putting the word out there wherever we can that industrial hemp is not marijuana. Industrial hemp can clothe us, can feed us, can put a roof over our heads, and it gives us what mankind needs. And at a fraction of the cost of cutting down all these trees.
Well said. Greg, I want to thank you for your time and for imparting all your wisdom to us and teaching us something that we didn't know before.
You're very welcome, Josh. My pleasure.
Today we were talking with Greg Flavall. He is the co-owner of Hemp Technologies, a construction company out of Asheville, North Carolina, that specializes in hempcrete construction. Well, that is the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to Julian Villard for lending us some of his music. And, of course, to our special guest, Greg Flavall, for joining us from Asheville, North Carolina. Think about it. Tell your friends about it. Hemp. I'm telling you, man, it is the next thing. It's the next best thing that's going to happen. It's going to be bigger than soy. You heard it here first. Josh Davis on hemp.com. Why don't you hand it over?
Take a load off your shoulder. Think I